Okay, here is another short video about taxonomy. Taxa are categories, and categories, so if we have taxa, it's a category, and categories are important for being able to group things by similarity. So we've got these different levels of organization from domain to kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. This is the broadest level up here, the domain level. Species is the most specific or narrow level. If we're looking for which levels have the most or least in common, things in the domain of, for example, eukaryota, or eukarya, it's sometimes spelled this way, have one thing in common, which is that they have a membrane-bound nucleus with their DNA inside of there. But if you're looking at members of the same species, they've got pretty much everything in common. You and I are both humans, and we have the same number of kidneys, we have the same type of blood supply, we have the same heart, we have the same types of cells, we have the same tissues, we have the same way to breathe, the same way to get rid of waste. We live in the same types of conditions. We eat the same types of food, or we can eat the same types of food. We've got so much in common with members of our own species. But if we're looking at things that have the least in common, that would be the domains. So this is a broad category here, and for domains, we've only got 3 to describe all life. So the archaea, bacteria, and eukarya or eukaryota. So if you have anything that's alive, and viruses are specifically off to the side here, they're related to life, they do something with life. We don't think that they're actually alive. But we have prokaryotes or eukaryotes. So do you have a membrane inside of your own cell that is a nucleus that contains your DNA? Do you have that? Or are you like the archaea and the bacteria, where your DNA is kind of free floating inside your cytoplasm? So for the prokaryotes, that's where we find 2 of these domains, the archaea and the bacteria. Archaea and bacteria are very, very similar to each other. Bacteria can have flagella, little tails that they use to propel themselves. Eukarya can have flagella too. Archaea also look a lot like bacteria. They're also single-celled. They all have a cell wall. Some eukaryotes have cell walls too, but they're different. For archaea and bacteria, the cell wall is the main difference between them. This cell wall in archaea is just made out of different chemicals than this cell wall in bacteria. And we used to think that was a minor difference until we did more chemistry and found out, actually, that's a really tough trick. So these 2 are separate, although they're all single-celled. Archaeans and bacteria are all unicellular. Eukaryotes is what we spend most of our time thinking about, because that's the domain of stuff that we think of as alive if we're generally thinking about things that are alive, like animals and fungi and plants. Also protista, and the protists are also only single-celled, and they're older. These are the oldest, well, we think, the oldest eukaryotes. Plants, fungi, and animals, these 2 are pretty closely related. You are very closely related to fungi, more closely than you are related to plants, and definitely more closely related than these 2 are. Fungi and plants are pretty separate. They do a lot of things, a lot of their chemistry totally different from each other. So these are the 4, we call them. You'll see lots of different things if you look up how many kingdoms exist. These are the 4 kingdoms of the eukaryotes. The protists, which are single-celled, the plants, which are plants, or plant-like, the fungi, which are like mushrooms, and the animals, which really move around. They've got phospholipid bilayers, they've got no cell walls. You know animals, you are one. Inside of the animals, of course, we can go down to lower categories, right? We could go back, so inside of the kingdom Animalia, we could see the different phyla, classes, orders, family, genus, and species. We're only going to look at phyla here because we would spend years if we were going through all the categories. So of the animals, so here we have something that split off from the protists. We have different phyla. So the phylum is the singular and phyla would be plural. We have things like sponges, the porifera. We have things like jellyfish, the Cnidaria. We have flatworms called the Platyhelminthes. We've got roundworms called the nematodes. We've got mollusca, which are the mollusks. We've got annelida, which are like an earthworm, the ringed worms, the worms that have kind of sections. We've got arthropods, which include things like lobsters and spiders and insects. We've got the echinoderms, which include things like starfish. And we've got the chordates. That's us. We have a backbone. We have a nerve that is traveling from our brain down our spine. So inside of the chordata, which is one of the phyla here, so we are in the kingdom Animalia, we're in the phylum Chordata, and then we keep going down to narrower and narrower and narrower categories. As we go down, we're excluding characteristics until we get down to species where we have excluded everything but members that are exactly the same. So this taxonomic system is, we call it the Linnaean system. It's not the same system that Carolus Linnaeus came up with initially, but it follows his principles, which is it needs to be hierarchical. It needs to have levels like this, where some things belong to broader categories. And it needs to have a name that is unique. So when we're naming a species, we use the genus name first, and then the species name next. We usually do it in italics. I don't know how to write in italics. Genus gets capitalized, species doesn't. But these two have to be unique. They have to be different than any other life form that's ever been named before. This is called the specific epithet, or sometimes we call it the binomial, the two-termed name. So if you're looking for something like Homo sapiens, that's us. We name ourselves Homo sapiens. Homo is our genus, and sapiens is our species. So if we say Homo sapiens, which species is that? Sapiens. Which genus? Homo. Which kingdom? Let's jump way up here to kingdom. Which kingdom? Animalia. We're animals. Which domain? Eukaryote. We're in the eukarya or the eukaryota. We are eukaryotic. So as soon as you know the species or the genus of something, you also know everything up there. So we know that we are primates. We know that we are mammals. We know that we have backbones. So we're chordates. We know all those things just from knowing the specific epithet, the binomial nomenclature, or we could just say the name, which is always going to be genus and then species. When we're naming something, we always do genus first, species next. And that should be enough to tell you everything about where they belong in the categorization.